So my message is that even in the earliest part of history, 6,000 years ago, there was an indication that people understood the libertarian message, that we shouldn't use violence against each other. But over the years, we have not concentrated on prevention and keeping the government from committing those violence against us. And I think that would be the next great step in the progress of civilization. And you say, oh, well, that's a long time off. But just think if there was an acceptance of that. I mean, I'm just so amazed at what happened in the last 100 years. And that's why when people ask me, how did you stand it? Weren't you awful frustrated? I said, never got frustrated with it. I just had real low expectations. So I didn't think I was going to change the world a bit. Politically, it didn't happen. But I hope I contributed a little bit to get the enthusiasm built for what sound government is all about. And to me, it's not complicated, it's very simple. The founders had a pretty good idea of what it was, and that was, ask the question, what should the role of government be? And the role of government is very precise. It should be to protect liberty. It's not to make you safe and secure and provide everything in the world for individuals. That's your responsibility, individual responsibility. And that to me is the question that never seems to get asked, because if you say, yes, the government should be very limited, that takes a lot of revamping in Washington. And there's the people there, our numbers may be growing, but the people in Washington just hunker down. The more threatened they get, the tighter they are about maintaining their power.
Essentially, I wanted to explain in some detail on the positive impact that Ron Paul has made in my personal life, because he ran for president in 2012. A lot of Ron Paul people discovered Ron Paul in the 2008 election. I was not one of those people, but I need to take you back, okay? So if you can hang out with me and to hear my story, I'll do my best to explain it. He not only cured my apathy in the world of politics, but gave me something positive to focus on and to be optimistic in the future. But these ideas of liberty, responsibility, freedom, and prosperity has affected my personal life in a positive way, has helped my marriage, helped my whole way that I look at life, and to put my focus back to the only thing that I truly have control over. And that's my own words, my own actions, and how I deal with things. So in 2011, instead of focusing on what I have control over, my own actions, who I am, and what can I do to improve my life, I spent my time pointing fingers and laughing at everybody else. So at that time in 2011, I tuned into the Republican primary. I didn't tune in there for any other reason but just to troll other people. Looking back, I know I did that to try to find some relief in my life, to try to find some relief from focusing on what I do have control over, and that's my own life. It's temporary relief. It works in the short term, but in the long run it doesn't pan out. I didn't realize that at this time.
But you know, the ideas of liberty have been around for a long time. I can trace it all the way back to the Hammurabi Code and to the Ten Commandments and the Declaration of Independence. And everybody even originally knew that non-aggression was a good idea. You shouldn't lie, cheat, steal, or murder, you know. And those are pretty good-fashioned libertarian viewpoints. But they've been distorted because of one thing. Most people recognize it. Your neighbors know that they're not supposed to steal from you and do all these things. But what they haven't recognized, all of history haven't really recognized it. If we as individuals and individual citizens, out of just sensible morality, we're not allowed to cheat, steal, and kill, why is it that we allow our government to do it? That's what has to change.
And Ron Paul did not run like a normal candidate, where you go up and you demonize this guy and play party politics and get lobbyists to pay your election bills. No. Ron Paul is one of the only members in Congress that shuns lobbyists. That lobbyists don't even talk to him anymore because the answer is no. No.
Bad. I think saying no to bad stuff is okay.
Yes.
But my wife generally resented this Dr. No stuff. Staff always loved it and supporters like it. But my wife said, nah, it just doesn't sound so good. So she said, well, maybe they just don't have the spelling right. Maybe it starts with a K.
Well, I think I think it definitely protests to a golden stamp when you do actually, agree with something and support it. Absolutely.
And I started to have respect for this anti-war stance. The idea that we shouldn't be the policemen of the world. The idea that we shouldn't be meddling in other countries' elections. But I thought I could still find other things I could pick on him about because he's an evil, hateful, rich, greedy Republican. Oh boy, I was wrong. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And I wouldn't have changed anything. And the more I tried to troll Ron Paul, the more Ron Paul's words and ideas won me over. Because unlike Bernie, who taps into my emotions of hate, depression, apathy, to try to get more power for the Bernie campaign, we have Ron Paul here, sitting down, sharing ideas, thoughts, breaking these concepts down to me in a way that I can understand in normal language.
And there's a good reception of young people. This idea that all young people are Bernie Sanders supporters, I don't believe that. But I also believe that even if they say, no, our numbers are bigger than your numbers, it doesn't matter. It's the value of your message, it's the value of your philosophy and your beliefs, and whether or not you can present it and convince other people to go along. And the opportunity is presenting itself. The more chaotic things get, the more opportunities you're going to have. And I think this little episode here today is an example of what the people can do. And I'm very optimistic that this bill will probably get passed and signed by the government. Another little step, but great significance that the people in Washington have messed it up badly, and they have undermined the Constitution, and they should not be permitted to create fraud. And that is what they do when they say, we have the monopoly, we have the Fiat Declaration, and we're going to tell you what legal tender is. And for a large part of my life, Americans weren't even allowed to own gold. That was reversed in 1975. That we were once again allowed to own gold, and the right was taken away in 1933. So the authoritarians coming into depression, first thing we need to do is get rid of this gold stuff, But so there's an advantage there. You can go on your own personal gold and silver standard, and if you think there's going to be problems, you can be better prepared. But the best preparation is spreading the message of liberty. That is the best investment you can do. Some people say, why do you bother coming out here? You could be back at home. But I'm investing in something I really believe in, and I always enjoy coming and seeing others who are thinking in these terms, because if only 4 of you showed up like they used to. There was a time I'd go to college campuses when I first went to Washington. I'd get 4 or 10 people, but I still went. Because this system is very fragile and it can get very violent. I think we're going to have economic problems, and I think the blowback from a foreign policy that makes no sense is going to continue to haunt us. But I think the precipitating event will probably be the panic, an economic panic, which will be greater than what happened in 2009. And then there will be a need for a revamping. So that's why I do go out and still talk to a lot of campuses. I come to Arizona and say, please pay attention, please spend the message, because the more of you there are around to promote ideas, the better off it's going to be. Congress is always a reflection of ideas. And it isn't really partisan. There's no Republicans and Democrat differences. They're all endorsing the idea of interventionism in our life, interventionism in the economy, and interventionism overseas. And they've all accepted the Keynesian model, but it's coming to an end. It's going to be chaotic. And our job as individuals, if we care, is to provide that answer. Leonard Reed was a friend of mine who started the Fee Foundation, and he says, your first responsibility, was his instruction, was improve yourself. Study, understand, make yourself available, and something will come along where you can participate in spreading this message. And in my sort of modest fashion, that's what I've tried to do, and I encourage other people to do it. And I have been amazed when I go around the country, well, how many people started their own organizations. It's fantastic and what is happening. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic.
And so instead of blaming everyone else for my own shortcomings and my own problems, right? It's the rich people's stealing my wealth, and that's why I can't be successful. Oh, it's this evil government that stops me from they should give me money and take care of me so I can become dependent on them. He broke it down to me that what we need is freedom. We need the freedom to lift ourselves up and to be a better person every day. This concept of freedom and responsibility, explaining to me that the more someone tries to control the situation, the less control they have.
And liberty provided great abundance for the people, and the standard of living has skyrocketed. It's been fantastic. But you know what the most unfortunate part about all that development was? Yes, it helped a lot of people. Standard of living has gone up, but guess what? It was used to create war. In the 20th century, in spite of all this advancement of technology and all this fantastic advancement, was never used really to have better personal relationships between people. So there was a lot, but so much of it also went into killing each other. So I would think if civilization ever wants to take another step, which I believe they can, because who in 1776 said, we're on to something here. This liberty stuff is good. In 100 years or so, you can't believe what's going to happen. And they couldn't predict, what happened in the 20th century of all the advancement. And right now, nobody can conceive of what could happen if, which is a big if, is for people to recognize that we as individuals have no right to intrude on the on the personal liberties or personal stuff of other people, and that you mind your own business, you don't hurt people. If you don't do well, you can't go to the government to steal something from somebody else to take care of you. It's up to you to take care of yourself. I love you, Dr. Cole.
Where Ron Paul was explaining that our Bill of Rights, which don't exist of goods and services, that our founding fathers had a vision that has made America the most successful country in all of history. Because instead of giving all the power to a centralized government and having that government give us free goods and services, hand out all the money, what we really want is we really want that government, that federal government, to protect the rights of everybody, to follow our Bill of Rights, and how our right to free speech, our right to worship how we choose, our right to the press, how these things are the roadmap to prosperity.
And I think it's going to be a big event. I talked at the rally today to describe how liberty has created great wealth in this country from the time of our founding and industrial revolution in 300 years. Most of the wealth of the world has been developed in that short period of time. We have learned very well how to use freedom to produce goods and services that make us live better. But we haven't done a very good job in demonstrating how you improve the relationship between people, to be more peaceful. And that's probably a bigger job. And that to me is not a complicated problem, because I think everybody can come together if they accept one law, and that is the law of non-aggression. Do not commit aggression against your fellow man. And governments be held to the same rules. The governments aren't allowed to do it anymore. I'm optimistic because I think in terms of long time, the Earth and the Moon and the stars is about 4.5 billion years old, and yet everything we see is a couple hundred years old. So why isn't it the human race can't advance to another stage? Why did we have all that advancement in technology and turn it into nuclear weapons and kill 100 and 200 million people in the last century? Why can't we all of a sudden have this understanding which really invites people to come together? Oh, you mean I'm free to do whatever I want? You mean the government's not going to tell me who I have to marry or not allowed to marry and what bathroom I have to go to? That kind of stuff. People get to decide this. People are free to do these things.
That whole idea, right? These millionaires and billionaires are the richest people on the planet. And the reason why you're poor is because they're greedy. So we need to take their money and give them to the most powerful organization in the world, the U.S. federal government. So now we have to give the most powerful organization in the world all the money in the world, and they already have all the money in the world, except here's the kicker: they're going broke. We are so much in debt.
I wanted to pop in here with an update at the time of the release of the video, which happens to be America's 250th birthday, July 4th, 2026. Right now, the U.S. national debt is nearing $40 trillion. That's a lot of cash. How can you put that into perspective? Well, how long do you think it would be if we were to go back 1 trillion seconds? If we were to go back in time 1 trillion seconds, where do you think we'd be? Well, A trillion seconds ago is over 31,000 years. To put that into perspective, right? That would literally be at our last ice age, when early humans were still living in cages and recorded history didn't even exist. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to point out here, right? We're not just doing slogans. We're not just saying, oh, we got a debt problem. We just need to tax the rich. Yeah, that's a solution. Slogans. No, we're looking at the numbers. U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio. This is how much we owe compared to how much we bring in each year. We see the time frame, right? In the 60s, it was like 53%. In the 80s, it was 35%. 2000s. Right now, though, it's well over 100. It's nearing 125%. We owe 25% more than we can take in. And then the other thing I pointed out in the video, interest on the debt. This is just what we're paying in banks payments, bank fees. We need to call the bank. My fees are so high. Over $1 trillion. And it is more than what we're paying in our defense spending in the U.S. Just something to consider here. This may not mean anything because I'm giving you raw data. Oh, there's numbers. Just tax the rich. No, seriously. This high and rising public debt creates several indirect but real burdens that are going to hurt the lower income households the hardest, right? You want to know why there's a wealth gap? Well, this has a lot to do with it. So educate yourself. Don't fall for silly, simplified slogans on complex numbers. Do some research, some critical thinking. Analyze the data. Because until you understand what the root cause of the problem is, you're never going to address it. You're just going to try different things. You're going to fall for people that tell you what you want to hear instead of acknowledging the uncomfortable truth.
And we have to pay interest payments on that. Today, in 2025, our national debt is $37 trillion. And the amount that we pay, just in interest, that we pay just to bank fees, is $1 trillion. The amount that we pay in bank fees on our national debt is higher than the amount that we pay in military spending. Well, now that our debt is $37 trillion, the amount that we're just paying in interest payments, that we're just giving up in bank fees, exceeds what the U.S. spends in military. That's absurd. That's completely absurd. And here, in the 2012 elections, our national debt was $16.4 trillion. And Ron Paul is educating me about where this is going. And he was right. Ron Paul has been right about a lot of things.
Now, there were a few economists, including von Mises, who says it can't work. Socialism fails all the time, and it will collapse, and it did. And we're in that situation now. So much of what you see has been built on fraud and lies and debt. We still have the most stuff in the world. We own 24% of the wealth, but we probably own 80% of the debt. So it's very fragile. And some countries are poorer than us, but you take a country like China, they have a lot of money in the bank, and that puts them in a better position. But this is very, very shaky. It's very fragile, and I think the system of what we've been living with for this 100 years, since especially 1913, will come to an end. I think our foreign policy will change. I think the monetary policy has to change because it's not viable. The big question is what are we going to substitute? It could collapse, and then those in charge and those who want to and believe that you're incapable of taking care of yourselves, they will come down very hard and say, law and order, we got to restore this, and we got to tell people how to live. And they don't understand at all, the people that are in charge, that if you have a right to read what you want, which you should have, and sometimes they intrude on that, if you have a right to practice your religion or no religion as you want, and you don't hurt people, that is recognized. But in this mess that we have a government, and there's many governments, ours is especially intrusive, that believe that they have this absolute responsibility to tell you exactly everything that you ever put into your body. And I think you can put into your body whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anybody else. If you have consequences, you suffer.
Exactly.
So the more they print, more taxes they retrieve, right. Because there's more paper money.
And you brought up how they back the dollar with tobacco, I know when I was growing up they backed it with oil. Do they seem to try to back money with goods that you can use up that go away at some point?
Well, when it's primitive, yes, they have to do it, something that you can use. But, in a more civilized society, in a modern society, they have accepted the idea that, a currency, like a gold standard, you can use it, and you can use, people keep thinking, well, you can't do that because you'd have to carry bags of gold around. But you have to have something better than this. You have to have a certificate. And people have to trust it. This is certified as either redeemable in gold and silver. Then you can use this, and then it can work. But they don't want to do it. If you dropped 100 people on an island, they had to survive together. They said, well, the first thing we need is a central bank to print the money. wait. People say, well, you're crazy, aren't you? But if somebody went out there and picked some fruit and planted some crops and caught some fish, there would be some value, and there'd be something that they would say. What if there were a few tools left over? That would have tremendous value to it. So almost anything could serve, depending on the condition. But if you want an advanced economic system, you want a currency, a money that you can trust, and trust the government. And that's where the problem gets into. As soon as things come up short, like Civil War, they just suspend the gold standard. War times, they do it.
So that way they can pay for the wars, sure.
Because the people won't support the welfare warfare state. The only way they can support this runaway government is to lie to the people that this really doesn't cost anything and deficits don't matter. It's this garbage that they've been hearing for 100 years. But the reason I'm optimistic is it's going to end. It doesn't work, and most of the time it ends badly. And I think why there's so much turmoil in the markets, up and down, and what's going on in Washington and elections and all, is people aren't quite recognizing the significance of the end of a philosophy that just doesn't work. To me, it says as almost as equivalent to the end of communism, which was a big event. Communism just fell apart when we didn't have to have a nuclear war. Sure. But I think the last 100 years of progressivism and Keynesianism and inflationism and paper money.
Well,
1917, the Bolsheviks taking over, and communism was a panacea. It was all done with good intentions to take care of the people, all those wonderful promises. Well, communism lasted 74 years. It dissipated between 1989 and 1991. People don't talk too much about communism anymore. At the same time, communism brought about is hard to count when it gets up into the hundreds of millions. It is estimated that possibly 200 million people died by people who were able to put bad ideas out on the table and look at the tragedy of what happened. That era is over and done with. We are not going to see the world go back to that type of a program again.
That we should demand from our leaders that they should be more responsible with our public funds. That there is no wealth in perpetual debt and interest payments.
It's an idea that people so often come to me and they say, you know, it's not that complicated, whether it's the monetary issue or running your own life. He says, that's just common sense. You know, it's common sense. There's a moral position on this. There's a natural rights argument. There's a God-given rights argument for this. And what, to me, is so wonderful about the libertarian message, it brings people together. And you say, oh, no, you libertarians are all monolithic. No, a good libertarian can be as liberal as they want to be. Just think about it. If you're a libertarian, you should permit voluntary socialism. People want to go out and be socialists, but they have to live with their own socialist group. But a socialist, an authoritarian, and that would include our government, we can't go by and say, okay, this group looks like a pretty good group. Let's start our own libertarian society. We'll take care of ourselves and we'll mind our own business. No way. I mean, they want the monopoly. And that's why young people have to understand this. All governments change ideologically. So this is why I've never had confidence, even though I spent a year or two in politics. The politician can't save you. It's only going to be people like you. In a way, what we did, we had an example of this today. We've had this example with the Fed now in the last 10 years or so. Although I've been talking about it for more, I figured that nobody would ever listen, but I would still talk. But now, audit the Fed is a reality. I mean, it's very likely to pass, and more people understand the monetary issue than ever before. So when the people change, and you can overcome those individuals who only want stuff stolen from one group and given to you. But the reason why it's going to get easier is all the politicians today say, oh, you can't do it. You can't vote to cut anything, which is probably right. You can't go up because people who are receiving will go nuts. But what happens when production goes to zero? They're going to have to look for something. And they always have to, in monetary affairs, when paper money exhausts itself, the people go into the black market and they use things of real value. And a lot of time it's silver and gold again. So it is the ideas and principles of liberty that can make all the difference in the world.
He was suggesting that I educate myself and take personal responsibility for my own education, which in the internet age is amazing. It's not like I had to pay admission to go into a brick or mortar school to actually learn something.
I think things are different now. I don't think we should be as depressed. We have more knowledge now than ever before. We also had the 1930s, a continuation of the progressive era. We had the Keynesian economic policies take over, the New Deal policies taken over, the fascism of Hitler and Mussolini. And they contributed to another 25 million people that died, just the fascism of Europe. So the 1930s didn't do as well either. And then that, of course, when you have bad economic policy, when you get involved in a war to end wars, that's only a war to begin more wars, and you end up in another world war, we end up, again, another World War II, and then after World War II, we have this internationalism come in. We have the development of the United Nations and the IMF and the World Bank. But they set up, of course, they were working toward worldwide currency, so they set up this Bretton Woods agreement on money, which was a total farce. The good economists, the Austrian economists at that time said, it can't work, it won't work. And indeed, when it fell apart, it was a very, very impressive day for me, because like it is tonight, a Sunday evening, it was on a Sunday evening, August 15th, 1971, the Bretton Woods monetary system collapsed. But that was predictable, and that's over with. And there are some, there's no doubt, would like to go back to that, but it also gives us the wonderful opportunity to advance forward.
Appreciation of the dollar has occurred. So do you agree with the representative?
Well, absolutely. It's since 71, it's down 95% or even more in purchasing power because governments always want to print money, and that's why they hate gold. And gold and silver are legal tender in their money because the Constitution said. But the Constitution says it because gold and silver became money in a natural way, even in prehistoric times. As long as they have recorded history, gold has been money, and because it's natural. Matter of fact, in the Austrian school, they say if it isn't developed in the marketplace, it's really not going to work very well. You can't take pieces of paper and all of a sudden people want it, and they usually want things. And a good example of what happens is when an economic system breaks down after a war or something, they try to restore some trading, going from pure bartering to having something as an exchange. And of course they've used tobacco, they've used cigarettes, and they use different things as a temporary issue, but everybody saw those stuff that had some value to it. But historically, gold is money because it's been accepted by the people, and it fulfills some of the requirements of money, and people have to want it and use it. It has to be exchangeable and divisible and these sorts of things that makes it convenient, and that's why it's money. And of course, when Bernanke denied to me that gold was money, I said, how can you change 6,000 years of history? I said, you might say that. It's not money because I say so. But history has shown, and the founders understood it, so they just put it in the law because they had this very bad experience with the continental dollar. Because, out of, quote, necessity, they realized the temptation of governments just to print money out of thin air. And so that's why it ended up in the Constitution to make a prohibition. And the Congress could coin the money, and that was their responsibility to maintain the value of that currency. And then there were some prohibitions to the state that you had to use gold and silver as money. So they protect everything that you're doing. You don't have to pass a law. You shouldn't have to, but that's what you're working for, to say that gold and silver is legal tender. Nature tells us that. Natural history tells us that. The Constitution tells us that. But still, you have to find out enough people to agree with us on it. But I really am optimistic that people will wake up, mainly because I still meet a lot of people like you who care. And the young people will be inheriting this. You'll have to deal with it. And we have to fill the vacuum because this will end. And that, to me, is very good news. But I think it's a total stalemate in Washington.
I was going on to archive.org where I could read and study some of our history's most amazing books. And one of the books that Ron Paul recommended was Frederick Bastiat's The Law. Frederick Bastiat's The Law was written in 1850 in France at a time where socialism was taking over France. This book is a small book. It was really influential to changing my mind on how I saw the role of our federal government and how absurd the ideas of socialism really is. By taking the power from the greedy millionaires and billionaires and giving that power to the greedy, centralized governmental power.
No longer will government assume they have the responsibility of protecting you against yourself. Nobody can do that. The emphasis will no longer longer be on economic and personal security, the government will take care of us, but it will be emphasizing the government is there to protect our liberty. You know, they can give us security, you know, whether it's economic, which always fails, or whether it's personal security. But you will become, if the government said we can provide you perfect security, isn't that what we do with animals that we breed to raise up and eat? I mean, this is what happens. They're secure. You put them in cages, you put them in fields, you fatten them up, you take care of them. They have all the food they want and the best nutrition until it's time to butcher. And this is saying, so what you want is liberty. You don't want this false sense of security that governments cannot give you.
One of my favorite books by Ron Paul is right here. And it's a play on words, right? It's The Revolution, a Manifesto. And I was fortunate enough to get Ron Paul to sign it. One of my biggest regrets is I didn't have Ron Paul personalize it for me. And it's a play on words, right? So it's not Karl Marx's manifesto, right? This is Ron Paul's Revolution, a Manifesto. I once had a friend when we were talking about Ron Paul, and I talk about liberty and freedom. And she says, well, liberty. He should define what liberty means, you know. He wrote a book called Liberty Defined. You can get a detailed explanation on exactly what Ron Paul means by liberty and freedom.
These conditions that have been developing for the past 100 years, and now we're in the midst of a change, providing an opportunity for a revolution towards liberty. This has provided some very serious problems for us. It will not be smooth sailing, but there's reason to be optimistic that we can have great achievement. But to me, the three problems that we have to face, number one, that I see as the problem, that if we solved it, it probably would solve most of the other ones, and that is the attack on personal liberty. Understood what personal liberty means, that you have self-ownership, that you have a natural God-given right to your life, therefore you have a right to your liberty, and we defend all life and all liberty regardless of our judgment about how people are using that liberty. Then we would have the natural sequence of saying, if that is the case, you have a natural right to keep the fruits of your labor and all life.
You have a great burden to bear, because I think that in a personal morality, if you have grasped what you consider the truth, and if you can spread that message in a voluntary manner, you have that responsibility to do it. To teach yourself, most of the responsibility is on ourselves to improve oneself. And then family and friends and neighbors or whatever else you can do. And so many who have been involved in the campaigns of the last 10 years have thought up other things to do.
And I applied this freedom philosophy to my own marriage. And I took a step back and I realized the only thing I really truly do have control over is my own emotions, my own actions, and how I deal with whatever life throws at me. And I'm so happy to see that these ideas have actually grown to where we are in 2025. I couldn't imagine where we would be in the world if these ideas hadn't hit the mainstream. And they're become more popular than ever. Long live liberty and freedom.
And I think religiously speaking, intellectually, should bring all factions together. And this is why when you meet an honest progressive, it's really interesting. Dennis Kucinich was one of my best friends, and we disagreed on medical care. But we just sort of set it aside, and we talked about civil liberties and foreign policy, but we came together on that issue. There's no reason why on these things we can't work with people. So for that reason, I'm an optimist, and I always get encouragement when I come out and talk to a few true believers, and I thank you very much.
I'm not just a Ron Paul fanboy. I'm someone who has some deep respect on that man's actions and words and the way that he lives his life, and so much appreciation for where I am in my life because of how Ron Paul lived his. Thank you, Ron Paul. Thank you for watching.
So I came out, and I was delighted I could meet with you all. And I think there's reason to be optimistic. And the big thing is believe in liberty. It will be very beneficial to us all, and you'll be on the right side of history. Thank you very much.